Okay, the stream is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adventure on so many levels. We're going to play some Draw Steel.
On God, maybe.
I'm Christiana Ellis, and tonight I suppose I'm the director of this session. Although all we're really going to be doing is walking through this early material and, playing around with the character creation tools, learning about the rules a little bit. We normally are playing Dungeons and Dragons Planescape, but we're down a couple of people. So tonight instead we're doing this. And joining
Yay!
us joining us tonight to make some Draw Steel characters, Nobilis,
Hi there.
Lee Burdett,
Hello.
Paul Weimer.
Hi.
I don't know why I said like it's slight like Weimer. um, and Dove Archambault.
Hello.
So, what is Draw Steel? Well, look at this. First of all, it has what is this game? It's the first page on what has just been shared. But a little bit of background. Matt Colville is someone who has done a lot of. Started making like just YouTube videos about Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games, and then has subsequently had a number of really successful Kickstarters to do various supplemental projects and products, including things like the Flea Mortals and Where Evil Lives books that have material for Dungeons and Dragons. And I've been a big fan of those books and have used a lot of the stuff from them in my own adventures. Since then. So I'm a fan of MCDM, which is his company. And this is their own sort of fully separate TTRPG product. And I backed the Kickstarter way back when. And now what we have here is not the final version. And it's not actually the quote unquote playtest material, but it is the first sort of content that has been released as part of like what is available to Kickstarter backers. And it has a lot of stuff. It has 5 different classes and the level up through level 1 character creation stuff and some of the basic rules. And I thought it would be fun for us to go through it. So is everyone excited?
Yes.
All right. So um, to begin, this this book focuses on what are some of the touchstones that they're looking for in terms of what this game would be. And they want it to be tactical, cinematic, heroic fantasy. So what do those things mean? Well, tactical means that there's a real focus on, you know, the combat is all designed to be done on a grid, similar to D&D in that sense. But there's also a focus on, there's a lot of different things, more than in D&D, that are designed to move both friendly and hostile characters around the battlefield. There's a lot more things that will like push enemies away or pull them towards you and that sort of thing. And there's also a different style of initiative where it's a bit more like there's an initial roll that is to determine whether a player character will go first. Like, does the player side go first or does the enemy side go first? But once that's determined, the two sides basically take turns. And so when it's the player's side, the players can determine what order you will act in, with the caveat that a round is defined by everybody goes once. So you can't have any character go more than once in a round, but you decide as a team what order. And that's designed to encourage like teamwork stuff. Like I'll set you up for this and then you do this thing, right? And certainly if you ever have a case where like there's more enemies than players, then it's like whoever's left over when you've gone back and forth alternating, just all go in a row and then it's the next round. But there's a lot of focus on tactical stuff like synergies and combos and all of that sort of thing. The heroic fantasy is definitely just, there's a lot of the stuff is designed with the idea that you are kind of a heroic adventuring party out there doing adventuring things, and further that you are also only focusing on the things that feel like heroic. So, for example, for instance, you never see Indiana Jones having to find a local sporting goods store because he needs to stock up on ammo. Never see Katniss Everdeen have to stop and take a shower because she stinks. So that's what they're kind of talking about here, is that this game is designed to assume those ordinary sorts of little errands and everything, those get taken care of off screen. We don't need to worry about tracking food or how many torches do you have and that sort of thing. And then cinematic is basically just focused on kind of the style of how combat might happen, and it encourages things that I actually frequently do anyway, which is to kind of sort of like, we open the scene as like this, and then, you know, if you get to a point where not all of the enemies are defeated, but it's, you know, it's a fait accompli, it's clear who's going to win and the rest is just mop up, you might just sort of fade, or you might just do it as a montage or that sort of thing. And there's a lot of encouraging that sort of approach. And then under fantasy here, it says just, you know, it's got dragons and stuff. And they talk a little bit more about that too. But so, and then it has some stuff here that's talking about what are the differences if we're coming from D20 fantasy, i.e. like Dungeons and Dragons or say Pathfinder. For one, we're not going to use a D20. We use 2 D10s instead, which if you are not into all of the actual like probabilities and stuff like that, it might not be obvious, like why you would say, well, what's the difference? Why not just use a D20 instead of 2 D10 added together? Well, it changes the probabilities of it. For one, if you think about it, rolling 2 D10s, you're never going to get a 1, right? The lowest you could get is a 2. A 1 on both die, right? The highest is still 20. But if you look at the probability curve, like the math of it, it's designed to make it less swingy, basically. So it's kind of like fewer of the extreme outlying cases. So, you know, fewer of the super high rolls, fewer of the super low rolls, more in the middle.
That being said, they have made the like top tier at 17 plus. So you can get a 17, 18, 19, or 20. And if you have no bonuses, that is that is 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1, because there's 4 ways to roll a 17, there's 3 ways to roll an 18, there's 2 ways to roll 19, and 1 way to roll 20. That's 10 ways to roll the top level out of 100. So they're kind of, you know, they're critical. Their best thing happens twice as often
as a 20 on a D20.
As a 20 on a D20.
To just to move to that, to push back on that just a little bit, they actually have a 19 or a 20 is an even better thing than
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's
So-
levels of
There's
criticality.
so
tiers
yes.
of
Yeah,
tiers
so
of results,
yeah.
and then criticals.
Yes, we will cover that in a moment. But first, there's 2 things, 2 addition, you know, a couple of other things. I'm going in the order that it has it here.
Right.
Another significant difference, and this is almost kind of in some ways highlighted by the fact that you can't get a natural 1 with this dice system, is attacks automatically deal damage. The lowest result you can get on an attack still hits and still does damage. The effect of your roll will determine how much damage you do and whether or not you get other effects, whether or not there are other consequences or not. But the system is designed to never have the least fun thing in D&D, which is it's your turn, you roll to attack, you miss, and now your turn is over. Like, I mean, I think we all like D&D here, but we all know that sucks when that happens. This is a system that's designed that doesn't happen. It is also, you don't need to rest all the time. In Draw Steel, you rest to regain your stamina and recoveries, but basically your spell slots and other features dwindle as the adventuring day goes on. That's how most games work. right? And then you have to, so it's a little bit complicated. Like this paragraph doesn't really get at all of what's happening, but there's an interesting mechanic in this known as victories, which is a resource that, so if you have an encounter or you successfully overcome some obstacle or something, you will gain a victory point. And this is a party resource, right? And they're not spent, but however many you have actually makes you more powerful. So you are gradually burning through your stamina and your recoveries, which are kind of how you heal. So eventually you're going to need to have a rest. But as you accumulate victories over the course of an adventuring day, you are, in fact, getting more powerful. You know,
So
many
there's a resource balance to be struck there.
yes.
Okay.
But so eventually though, you will need to do what is called a respite, which is a full 24 hours in, I think, a place of safety, it says, where once you do that, it resets your victories back down to 0, but they become experience, which is how you gain permanent upgrades to your character, how you level up, right? So you have to sort of, there's sort of a risk and reward mechanic there where the more you push forward, the more victories you get, the more powerful you are, but eventually you are going to need to rest, and then that settles back down, but you gain that as experience. Which is, it's like, all characters earn the ability to use their magic and other awesome abilities as they adventure, encouraging you to press on heroically. So many of the character options you will see might say you can do something as many times as you have victories, right? So that's going to be something you're going to see in the character options. So some of these other ideas is that there are some classes that are going to have some rough analogs, but they're encouraging that there are a lot of different character options that create mixes and matches that are not going to be directly in alignment with any other class list. So just because a conduit is kind of cleric-like, don't assume that the only sort of character you can make with a conduit is going to be like a cleric. It points out there are smaller bonuses and penalties in this dice system. So like you're not going to have a +5 to something, but you might have a +2, right? But it's just pointing out that in this dice system, those smaller numbers still have a more significant effect than they do in other dice systems. There's also a lot of skills to choose from, and you'll see that when we look at the skills list. And then and it also has a nice paragraph here, I think, which is good for any role-playing game, is we don't expect you to do everything to the letter. This is actually one thing Draw Steel does have in common with D20 Fantasy. This is a big book of rules. Don't stress if you need to look something up or make a ruling about an edge case on the fly. If everyone's having fun, you're doing it right. So, there are some things that are pretty, basic, close parallels to D&D. For example, you have, in this one, characteristics rather than, say, ability scores. They are might, agility, reason, intuition, and presence. And although it's 5 of them instead of 6, I think they break down in pretty obvious ways. I don't know that we need to go into those too much right now. Dice, just reiterating here that generally most of the dice you're rolling when you make your tests or make attacks and moves and so on is you're rolling those 2d20s. There are also some things that will make occasional use of of a 6-sided die. And then there are some things that'll call for rolls of a d3, which, you can just do as a d6, right? A d6 where a 1 or a 2 is a 1, 3 or 4 is a 2, etc. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, here it is. It's like always round down. Anytime something says to divide something in half, always round down. I appreciate a really obvious place where it says that. And it's not like sometimes round up and sometimes round down. It just says, no, always round down. That's the rule. Just, that's it.
Mhm.
So, but here's where we
Half
were.
of one is 0, deal with it.
Yeah. And so making a power roll, you don't need all of these other dice, for example, to determine damage, because here's how it works, is that you roll your 2d10, you add whatever the appropriate characteristic is. If you have a skill that would apply to it, then you're going to add a bonus for that. And then there are things like edges and banes, which is we'll come to in just a moment. But basically, it's mostly 2d10 plus whatever the characteristic is. And there are 3 possible results you could get. And this is a little bit like Powered by the Apocalypse, where you have, if you get an 11 or lower, tier 1 result, which is it's the worst result you can get. You still do something, but the impact is minimal. With this result, an attack ability might do a little bit of damage and not much else. For a test, tier 1 result means you fail at what you set out to do, and you might also suffer a negative consequence. So you could still fail, like, to climb, to climb up a wall, right? But you're never going to have a case where you swing your sword and just miss clean and nothing else happens. Tier 2 is if you get 12 to 16. That's going to be your middle of the road result there. Tier 3 is when it's 17 or higher, and this is what Nobilis was talking about earlier, and that's the best one you get. And so there are various places where it is going to describe the tier 1 through 3s in different ways. Many of the abilities you're going to see in the character options are going to say, for example, when you use this ability, here's what the different tiers of result will do. And although it doesn't say so right here, there are some things where if you get a 19 or a 20, it's even better. It also says you can choose if you want. If you rolled high enough to get a tier 3, but you wanted the tier 2 result for some reason, you can always do that. And then, and then talks about the natural result. And so, like, for example, if you get a, oh, okay, so this is what I was talking about. The natural 19 or 20 is what's special. So not just getting, so if you roll 14 on the dice and you had +5 that you add to it, and that makes 19, that's not the special result. That would still just be tier 3. But if you get 19 or 20 on the dice, you will always achieve the tier 3 result no matter what the rest of the total would be.
So if you have a negative in a score,
Mm-hmm.
or a negative you add to it, you still get a benefit.
Yeah.
Rolling high.
So in any case, there's also edges and banes, which are loosely a little bit like advantage and disadvantage in D&D. Basically, anything that would give you some degree of benefit is called having an edge. If you have something that is like extra edge, or if you have 2 different things giving you an edge, that is a double edge. If you're rolling a power roll with a single edge, you add 2 to the roll. If you have double edge, you don't add anything, but you automatically get the next highest tier. So if you have a double edge and the number result would be tier 2, you get tier 3. Bane is basically the same way, but opposite. If you have 1 Bane, you subtract 2. If you have double Bane, you don't subtract anything, but you get one tier lower as a result. And Banes cancel each other out, much like advantage and disadvantage do, in the sense it's basic addition. You can't ever have more than 2 edge. You can't have more than 2 Bane. But if you have 1 of each, that's a neutral. They cancel each other out. If you had 2 edges and 1 Bane, that results in 1 edge. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Which I like.
Yeah.
That allows some flexibility while not having it be overburdened.
Mm-hmm. And so lots of things might give you bonuses or, banes or edges, and some of the character options you're going to look through are going to show those too. There's also hero tokens, which seems to be along the lines of inspiration, where when players roleplay their heroes well or take big risks, the director can reward them with the potential to restore vitality when it's needed in the form of hero tokens. And you can spend a hero token on your turn when you take damage. On your turn or whenever you take damage. When you do, you regain stamina equal to your recovery value. We're going to talk about those more in just a moment. But basically, it's basically just a little boost of healing instead of like a reroll, for example, which is one thing that's actually also makes it always going to be a positive thing, right? Because one thing that can happen with inspiration sometimes is you can get that extra roll, but sometimes the extra roll doesn't actually help. Like it's lower and, doesn't do anything. And that doesn't make it bad. Like this is not a criticism of D&D, but this is just like what they're trying to do with the difference, I think. It talks about how this is a game of exceptions. This is similar to D&D in the sense of saying, anytime there's a general rule and then a specific rule that seems to go against that general rule, the specific wins. Because lots of those specific rules are specifically designed to say, normally it's like this, but you have a special ability that lets you break that rule. And then you got some of the same terminology that we've seen elsewhere: creatures, objects, PCs, NPCs, etc. And then here's where we're talking about victories a little bit. So each time your hero survives a combat encounter in which the party's objectives are achieved, your victories increase by 1. And it can be, that's at the director's discretion. So for example, if a particular encounter is just super easy to be trivial, you might not get 1. Things that are even more like extra dangerous, like a really tough boss fight, might actually get you 2 victories.
Vampiric victories.
Huh? Well, I
What
mean,
about-
I
just
think you
curious.
could, in the story, there's no mechanic for a Pyrrhic victory, but certainly there could theoretically be in any adventure a time where technically you win the encounter, but did not achieve some other thing that you were wanting in the story. But there's no mechanical punishment for that.
Okay. I mean, I just, yeah.
Are you planning to
That's
kill us
fine.
all off, Doug?
Oh, I would never do
See,
that.
Uh-huh.
And it highlights here too that this doesn't have to be a fight. It could be like an environmental obstacle or a tough negotiation of some kind. Anything where it's basically just you had to do some stuff and it was hard, but you did it. Could be a victory. And then when you finish a respite, your victories are converted into experience. But you're going to see, as we again look at the character options, that there are going to be several things that say that your ability's power is dictated by how many victories your party has. And then you have, so we've talked a little bit about recoveries. Every hero is going to have some amount of stamina and some number of recoveries. And recoveries are in some ways a little bit like hit dice, but basically you can, even in combat or at any time out of combat, you can spend an action to use a recovery, which restores 1/3 of your total stamina value. There are also abilities that will let other people use a recovery without having to spend their own turn doing it. But it's notable that even when someone else is, quote, healing you by letting you use a recovery, you are still spending your recovery. And even I think there might be some that could say let someone use 2 recoveries or whatever. But even in that case, there's no, it's all still spending that recovery resource that you have for your character.
Sounds familiar that they borrow that from some game like this. I can't remember the game though, but that's a mechanic that sounds familiar to me. Like you have a certain amount of recoveries and certain classes can spend your recoveries on you immediately.
I
When
didn't
you-
read it carefully, but I vaguely recall that 4th edition D&D had something.
Well,
a bit
maybe
like
that's
that.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it was fourth edition,
Fourth
and we
edition
played
had-
fourth edition
I
quite a
believe
while,
they
a
had
while ago.
healing surges.
Yeah.
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 So in any case, when you finish a respite, you also regain all. You are back up to your full number of recoveries. A respite is a focused period of rest and recuperation that allows heroes to regain stamina and recoveries. During a respite, you must spend 24 hours interrupted and doing nothing but sleeping, eating, dressing your wounds, and recuperating. You can also undertake one respite activity, such as making a project roll, which is for things like crafting. Or changing your kit. Kits is kind of your gear, but there's some interesting ways that it works here. It's a little bit like video games where there's a job system where you can take different characters and give them different jobs, and it changes some of the things they can do. It's interesting, and some kits are going to be better aligned with other character options than others. But theoretically, there is no rule that says that your caster character can't put on heavy armor. It's just probably not going to be as effective for them as it and they might be prevented from doing the things that they would normally want to do. Here's some stuff that is talking a little bit about their basic setting here, because it relates to how their the different ancestries work. And as people may have been seeing, if they're watching the stream, we have some art that was sent out along with this early material that shows some of the different ancestries. And I think we'll talk about those a little bit more in detail. I'm not going to read all of this right now, though. A lot of it is very familiar stuff if you have been following MCDM's things in the past. A lot of it's material that has showed up there and other things. Like, for example, a lot of the creatures in Flea Mortals, different creature types in there, show up again here, which all makes sense. But I'm not going to read through all of that. Certainly all of you can look at any of that in your own time. But yeah, so that's all that's lore, that's world building, setting, and stuff. So, everyone ready to make heroes?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
So, this is kind of a more like a, toolbox messing around than a real prepared for session. But it has some good guidance here talking about things like if you're doing a real campaign, you'd probably want to talk about things like safety tools. You would want to talk about, well, what's going to be the campaign setting, whether it is the default one for this game or if it's something else. Players can say, I would like this game to have certain themes, all basic beginning a campaign stuff. But so let's talk about step-by-step hero making. And the first step here is think about what kind of basic character concept have you got in mind. The questions they have here are like, do you fight with weapons, magic, psionics, or some combination? Outside of combat, what do you want your hero to do well? What did you do before becoming a hero? Why did you choose to become a hero? What is your personality like? What people, places, and objects are important to you? How will your hero complement the strengths and weaknesses of the other heroes? And it is interesting that this game encourages you to do that first, just because not all games do. Some of them really imagine that you would be doing things like choosing a class and all of those other mechanical things first, and then deciding what your personality is, right? It's just, not that there's any wrong way to do it. It's just interesting that they choose to front load it here. So then there's ancestry. And so ancestry is, the version of, race, or what's going to be species now in the new 2024 handbook, I guess. And then so we have some artwork of some of these. We're going to talk about some of the basic options here in a moment. We're going to create your hero's culture. And so that's going to be something where if we were playing a campaign, I would probably say, here's a number of different cultures that are going to be in the setting, and you could work within any of those. But it's really interesting that it really gives options for you to basically say, you can invent the culture that your character is from, and different choices produce different mechanical benefits. And then separate from that is what was your career? Like, what did your character do before they decided to become a heroic adventurer? And then class, which we'll talk more about, then kit, and then free strikes, complication. Complications are an interesting optional thing, which is basically sort of like a little devil's bargain sort of situation where you you accept that something has happened to you that gives you both a benefit and a penalty of some kind, and then determine details, make connections, etc. And then one of the other things here too that it has as an explicit rule here is changing character options. If you pick a skill, ability, class, or any other option that you end up not liking after using it in your game, even your character's ancestry, you can always freely change that option between game sessions. If you want to change an option during a session, ask your director. If they say it's fine to swap that out for something else, go for it. But it has like an explicit rule. Like it does not even say ask your director if you want to do it between sessions. It basically just says no. You know, built into the game, you can switch it out if you like. I think that's a neat idea there. Obviously, I think in a real campaign, you probably would want to talk about it with your director, but at the same time, I think it encourages. It's part of that whole tactical play, right? Because if you sort of find you picked something and then it turns out to not work the way you thought it would. And you're not having fun with it. It just really is designed to say that then change it. Okay, so and then it talks a little bit about like leveling up, but none of the material that we've got right now tells us really much of anything about what the higher levels are going to be. We only have the stuff that lets us make level 1 characters.
Mm-hmm.
So, ancestries. I'm not going to read all of the individual characteristics of each one. I'm going to sort of flip through the basics of it right here with the art, but then I'm going to kind of trust the rest of you to kind of look at the details for each one. But I'll describe them just for the devil, which is the first one here, just sort of to get everyone the impression of what sorts of options are being presented for each. So the devils are, they're kind of tieflings, right? The idea here, the presented origin here is that there were devils that had been summoned from hells and then for one reason or another ended up stranded, outside of hell. But that doesn't mean that all devils you meet had that happen to them. Some of them may just be the descendants of other devils that happened to, and now they just live here. One of the neat things about this book is that for each of these ancestries, it has a little sort of page or so of fiction, just describing sort of a character who is a devil, describing like, oh, this is how I got here and how I live my life and what kind of person I am. And I like having that as sort of a way to sort of give an impression of what a character might be like. But so then we have starting size and speed. This size here, it says it's 1M. That's basically medium. We can talk about the actual size breakdowns later, but most people are going to be medium, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
And speed of 5, that's going to be your default. And it is 5 squares. It is not 5 feet. It is, the squares, whatever the size of the squares are, is actually up to the director to decide. And you might decide that it's 5 feet because that's a sensible number, but all of your abilities and such are going to describe your abilities in context of how many squares.
Oh.
Yeah. And then so as you get to devil benefits here, fiendish features, you have 3 fiend points, and there are various things that cost different amounts of points. And so you can choose different ones you want, equaling up to 3. And so if you wanted like beast legs that improve your speed by 1, that would be 2 fiend points. If you wanted horns, which give you an edge on presence resistance rolls, that would be 1 fiend point, etc. And then there's silver tongue. You can twist how your words are perceived to get a better read on people. You gain an edge when attempting to discover an NPC's motivations and pitfalls during negotiations. Negotiation is interesting too because they have a whole mechanical system for doing a tough negotiation in this game, which is kind of neat. So, like, this is just an example for each of these ancestries of the kinds of things that are in it. It will have a general description of, like, what are they like? What are their characteristics? How did they come to be in the world? A little bit of fiction to describe, you know, how one individual of that ancestry might be, and then your mechanical stuff. So, other ancestries that are in this material, we've got the devils, got dragon knights, pretty cool looking. We've got the dwarfs, and it's interesting here that they are, in this, their flesh is literally infused with stone, a silica-organic hybrid, making them physically denser than other humanoids. And
And they
then,
do just pop out of holes in the ground.
yeah.
That's very
Yeah. Don't talk about their
Glorantian.
mothers like that.
And then we've got high elves. High elves here that you can see, you know, pretty, you know, I think we can imagine that seems like a fairly close parallel. And then there's woad elves, which, at least in the art here, they've got more animal-like ears, which is kind of neat. So kind of these almost little, like almost like bat ears, it looks like. And then we also have the Hakan, who have so they're kind of, you know, probably the closest parallel would be Goliath, in the sense that they are sort of half giants in that regard. But it's got an interesting sort of lore origin. I know that stood out to you, Nobilis. Did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, with this actually reminded me a little of the character Rel in the movie Crawl, which has a lot wrong with it, but also has a lot right. And you know, this Doomsight ability that basically you can't kill them until it's time for them to die.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the lore for them, at least in the default setting, is that they were a like a clan of giants that traded some of their size for this future telling ability, but the trick that they were sort of deceived is the only future telling ability that they ever get is the moment of their own death. But as a result, their culture has kind of developed into this thing where instead of being afraid of it, like they have, as part of that whole thing, is that their death is always going to be something meaningful. So they actually kind of seek it out. Like they know when it's going to happen, or they have seen the moment of it. They don't necessarily know what leads to that moment.
yeah,
But they are deliberately putting themselves in places where they would be possible. It would be possible for them to have their heroic death, and there is actually a mechanic for them where, if you have in the campaign a decision to say, no, this is this encounter that we're starting is the one, you basically have mechanics that allow you to kind of do, you know, even more extraordinary heroic stuff, but at the cost that you're going to die at the end of the encounter. So there's some interesting stuff there. And also they're big. The one in the little fiction here is described as 9 feet tall, and that's a woman. So and note, as the size is 1L, so that's you know, bigger than the others. Did you?
The male Hakan art is like that is a lot of muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, we got humans.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is neat in this game, this setting, is I think it put some thought into how do we make humans not just the boring default, like that doesn't have anything interesting, right? They're not just ordinary. What's special about humans in this setting? Well, ironically, I don't know if it's not maybe ironic, but interestingly, in this setting, humans are uniquely able to sense magic. Like you can just sort of feel it in the air, detect the supernatural. As a maneuver, you open your awareness to detect supernatural creatures and phenomena. And until the end of your next turn, you know the location of any supernatural object, undead, construct, or creature from another plane within 5 squares of you. So it's just gives them an ability that nobody else has in that way, which I think is neat and still makes playing a human feel fantastical instead of just like, well, you know, if you're going to be in a fantasy world, why would you just be human? Well, because these humans can still do fantastical things.
Yeah, I could almost see that being something like you almost like humans are not necessarily native to the world. Like they weren't created with magic around, so they react differently to it.
I also like the staying power ability,
Yeah.
which kind of ties into that internet meme of humans as a persistence hunter.
Right. Don't
Yeah.
chase
Yeah.
down your dreams. Walk at a reasonable pace until they get tired and lie down.
Mhm.
So in any case, that's, you know, we've got humans. Then there's Memo Neck, which are, we've got the art here showing them is still basically humanoid, but, you know, kind of like, you know, blue. But at the same time, the idea is that they are, their bodies are made of like hard material, almost like porcelain, like they're almost almost like constructs, and they are from the plane of logic. And in some of the little lore stuff here, it talks about how in the plane of logic, they describe emotions as not something that happens to you, but rather it's like a costume you put on. If you want to be angry for a while, then you act angry for a while, and it's fine. But then when they come to this plane, instead, all of a sudden they find that they are subject to their emotions in a way that they weren't before and don't always control them as well. But I think that that's not a like a mechanical thing. That's just an encouraged lore thing. But as you're, you know, so that's they are lightweight because they're silicone bodies. Actually, I wonder if they mean silicone or silicon.
Silicone would be fun.
That is a very common misunderstanding. People who don't really know like material science or chemistry will frequently confuse silicon and silicone. I would encourage people to learn the difference. They are quite different.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's obviously a relation there, but if you're
I,
describing the characteristics of something, saying something is made of silicon versus silicone is going to describe 2 different objects.
yeah.
Yes.
I could make a joke here, but I'm not.
There are many.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Keeping
But
it PG-13.
yeah,
All right.
but
Yes,
the
indeed.
other thing about them though is of course that the idea that at least in the default setting, they're not from around here, right? Like they're from a whole other plane. They're not native to this plane at all. And then we have orcs. These are pretty standard orcs as far as I kind of skimmed this, but they seem like they are what you want orcs to be. They're pretty cool looking in this little.
Yeah. Talk
I,
about muscles.
I like this guy up here in the artwork here where he's got what initially looks like one of that like Klingon weapons, but it's like a guitar. It's like a musical instrument.
Harp sword, it looks
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
which
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So orcs, and then there's polders, which are kind of like, you know, halflings or gnomes. They're small, but one of the things that's interesting about them is that they have an innate ability to blend with shadows. They can literally just like turn their body into shadow material.
Interesting.
Then we've got revenants, which are, you know, as kind of you might expect, they're sort of undead, but you know, focused. You know, they've got minds and souls and such. And part of what you do when you make a revenant is you decide what your ancestry was before you died, but whatever that was, you don't get those ancestry benefits. You get the revenant benefits instead. But you could be, for example, any of the other ancestries and now a revenant. Time Raiders. Now these showed up in the Flea Mortals book. They're kind of punky here. These things that look like mirrored sunglasses on their face is actually, that's just what their eyes look like.
Oh.
Yeah, they've got 4 arms and they're from space and they do time stuff. And they're basically, reflavored, Get Yankee is kind of the idea here. Some of the lore is even, this is a, gentle homage with the serial numbers stripped off, that sort of thing, because there's also, they were once a slave race to the voiceless talkers, but then rebelled and fight against them now. And so it's like, okay, all right.
But punky.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
yeah.
I am not complaining. These guys look badass.
Yeah.
But yes, they've got 4 arms and they come from space and they do time stuff. Psychic also, psionic. And so those are the ancestries that are available in this, in this playtest material that's been sent out. So before we kind of actually start going through them, because actually, so if we go back up to that step-by-step hero making. So ancestry is the first thing that we pick. So does everyone kind of, for your own sort of building one? Everyone's chosen one?
Yep.
Yeah.
So how about you just, everyone say which one you picked and why?
I
I picked Hakan. It's clearly, I thought that was cool.
Sure.
I've been going through the rest of the book and like, okay, all right, and things are coming together. But you know what? Maybe we can go back actually to the step 1 of think.
Yeah, that's what I've
and
got on the
talk
screen right
about,
now.
Yeah, I was thinking of just talking about like the concept. And what I wanted was a very different take on the rogue. We think of rogue as small and sneaky and, gets their sneak attacks in by being hidden and stuff like that. But I was looking at the mechanics for all this, and I have the idea of an order of assassins is a strong term. People who make problems go away.
Fixers.
Fixers. And they have an isolated place. Monastery has got all kinds of connotations to it, but it's probably the best term. And
Safe house.
Yeah, well,
Base.
citadel maybe is a better term. And they have their doom sense come to them, and because they are, focused on, okay, this thing has to be dealt with, and because they're Hakan and they can never be permanently killed until they've reached that point, the name of their order is the Relentless. Because, short of like imprisoning one, they're really hard to stop.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Who else wants
That's
to talk about
that's
their
the concept I built.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great. Does everyone want to kind of do that, to sort of like come up with a concept first, and then we see how you choose to make that?
Yeah. So my character, basically my thought is something kind of can jump behind, defensive lines and things like that, and just kind of, in and out, do damage.
Sure.
And I was thinking, kind of thinking rogue, but also like more almost a monk type of a deal?
Well, the classes here, like
I know.
it specifically said, well, but like hold
yeah.
on. So we definitely want to try to, rather than try to figure out which one of these classes is like the
Yeah.
rogue, right? Like look at what the ability choices are and stuff.
Oh, what I'm thinking is like a combination of the class and kit and such,
Sure, yeah.
and my ancestry is Dragon Knight.
All right, cool.
Ah,
What
okay.
made you choose Dragon Knight?
Wings.
Okay, there you go.
I, you know, can fly in, or the class I'm thinking has another option. So
yeah.
yeah.
One of the things that I'll just note as not to suggest you should have chosen differently, but just because I think it's interesting. Wings is one of the fiendish options you can pick for a devil.
I did see that,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
I like the flavor of
Oh
Dragon
no,
Knight.
that's fine. I was only observing that for the stream.
Yep.
Yep.
So that's great. Who else has one?
I have to rethink now.
Okay. Then I the concept I came up with first is just kind of like the image in my head of a very dark-skinned devil.
Mm-hmm.
She's got a prehensile tail and hell sight, which means A, she can't be flanked, and B, she can see and whatever. And then I like the silver tongue ability.
Nice.
Also, but I am not sure if she's going to be an elementalist or a conduit,
Well,
but I
we're
like
not
yeah,
there yet.
I'm not there. I'm not there yet, but character concept wise, I like the idea of her being some kind of magic worker, and the way she casts spells is that she blows kisses.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh, neat.
And
Like you.
I think because she's a devil, she's from like an outer hells, like the outer hells where the fire has turned to obsidian. So she's in the Obsidian Academy, and she was a student there before she was summoned.
Wow. Okay. On top of this.
So that's what I've got
All
so
right.
far.
Sure. Okay. So, Paul, did you wanted to rethink because you were going to be a Dragon Knight? Was that what happened there?
Yes, I was going to think it was going to be a Dragon Knight. I was thinking Devil, and then that, but
Well, there is absolutely nothing wrong with
no,
two
no,
people
but
picking
but
the same one, right?
if you know, but
Honestly, be a Dragon Knight. Be one.
Yeah, absolutely.
all right.
Absolutely.
Remember the
You-
Dragon Brothers from Icewind Dale? Come on.
So
Yeah.
that's
Dragon siblings. Got
well,
it.
well, right. I was thinking because I sometimes like to do this with the new system. Like, how do I take an old character and see how they kind of fit into this system? So obviously, I want to see how Ollie would work in this system. Ollie from our Rhyme of the Frost Maiden game where I played a Dragonborn Paladin. It's like, how can I build a Dragonborn Paladin in the system? So that's what I was thinking. I want to see how. I mean, obviously everything's not going to match up, and this thing isn't complete. But I want to see where does that take me. So I'm thinking conduit, but we'll see how it goes.
All right. Well, so we don't even go to class yet, though. We've got other things to pick before we would even get there. Because so now that everyone's picked an ancestry, culture is what's next. And so culture is something where it talks about how in the setting that the campaign might play in, the director might come up with a number of existing cultures that you could choose from, but it also has tools here which basically talk about just building your own culture to be however you want it to be. And what that involves mechanically is first of all, you're going to choose what language they speak there. So, and that would be one language that you know, in addition to the common one, which is Kalian is the common language here. You would know one language of your culture in addition to knowing Kalian. And then you're going to choose a category for the environment, organization, and upbringing aspects of your culture, and that gains you access to different skills. And so I'm going to flip us over to the list of skills here in a moment, but everyone should sort of pick the culture categories first so that you know what categories you're choosing from. So your culture that you're picking should have an environment that is either nomadic, rural, secluded, urban, or wilderness. And depending on which one you pick, like secluded here, it says skill options. You're choosing one skill from the interpersonal or lore skill groups, meaning between those two categories, you pick one skill, not one from each. And so that is all, you pick that category, you decide, you figure out what are those two lists, and then we'll flip to what those lists are in a moment. But then organization, you want to choose is your culture anarchic, bureaucratic, or communal. And likewise, you're going to pick another skill from one of the two groups that it lists for that category. At last, upbringing, was it academic, creative, illegal, labor, martial, or noble? And the other piece here too is career is the next step. So like what your job was is the next thing. So this is more about like what's around you rather than necessarily your specific individual's choices. But so the skill lists are actually much further back. Let's see where.
If you've got the character sheet, I printed mine out.
Oh, okay.
Because, it's easy to find in the character sheet.
So yeah, here's an example. I'm showing it on the stream right now. As you can see, these are fairly complicated character sheets here, but it has this list along the left-hand side of the second page there. But I'm showing it also here in the master PDF. So there's crafting skills, which include alchemy, architecture, blacksmithing, fletching, forgery, jewelry, mechanics, tailoring. And that's just one category. There's also exploration skills, which has things like, climb, gymnastics, jump, ride. Interpersonal skills, which might include flirt, intimidate, perform, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Intrigue skills, which might have alertness, conceal object, pick lock, sneak. And lore skills, which has things, culture, magic, nature, religion, etc. And so there's a lot of these different skills. And as you may, so basically when you are making a check where your skill might come into play, it gives you a +2, basically, is how skills work mechanically. So from those choices, who has chosen what their culture's categories are and what skills you're choosing from those lists?
I've chosen.
Okay.
We talked about the monasteries, so the relentless are secluded, communal, and martial.
All right. Cool.
And so for secluded, I chose I get an interpersonal or lore,
yeah.
and I chose intimidate because when the relentless shows up, it's that's intimidating. For the communal, there was either crafting or interpersonal, and for that I chose persuade.
Okay.
And then for the martial, one of the skill options was alertness, and that seemed appropriate, so I took that.
Yeah, it's interesting that all of the previous categories were just like one from either of two lists, but some of these upbringing ones are more specific. So like martial specifically says one of the alertness, blacksmithing, climb, endurance, fletching, intimidate, jump, monsters, ride, or track skills. So it's like one of those specifically as opposed to from a category. And it has a little info box here too that says if the culture you create doesn't grant a skill that you want, check with your director about modifying what the culture's aspects offer. And it's basically just giving the advice that I think should always actually be explicit in RPG books, which is that you can really do whatever you want. Just talk through it. It's fine.
Where are you finding these lists of possible things?
On the character sheet.
So on the second page of the form fillable character sheet, it's all along the left side, but it's also in the main PDF. It's starting on page 88.
Okay.
I have mine.
Okay.
But environment is rural, or no, urban, sorry.
Okay.
And for that, um, I chose handle animals,
Okay.
uh, bureaucratic, and that had intrigue or lore, and I chose history from lore. And then upbringing was creative, which I chose blacksmithing
Okay.
for the crafting skill group.
So I have no objection at all, but I'm interested in choosing an urban setting, and then the skill you choose from that is handle animals.
I mean,
There's nothing wrong. I'm just asking what your thought
I'm
process
thinking
was.
more like a kind of, a little bit of an introvert,
Mhm.
does her job, but is less of a oh, hang out and have and party or whatever. Or
Okay. But well, like, how would you have been learned? How would you have learned to handle animals?
I
What
mean,
animals?
mostly pack animals, I would say,
Okay.
like horses or the ox or whatever.
Okay. Sure.
Because got gotta gotta deliver materials, gotta make deliveries of finished product.
All right. Cool. All right. So, who else
Okay.
is their skills ready?
Okay, so remember, Ale was from a small little village way, way east. So rural, communal, and labor. So the skills I picked out of that are religion, alertness, and heal.
Okay. Very nice. So,
Okay. So I've got because she's living in a school, so it's a rural
mm-hmm.
community, which means I get crafting or lore. So I picked alchemy from crafting. I'm looking at, because it's a school, it's also bureaucratic, because what school is not bureaucratic?
Mhm.
And so I was looking at the intrigue skills, and I think I'm going to pick performance just as something to pick. And then lore skills I get from it being an academic
Mm-hmm.
setting. And I think that's going to be magic,
All right.
obviously.
Obviously. All right. All right. So that's everybody for culture, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So next is career. And this is, again, it's going to influence a few things like you're going to get some more skills. Each career grants you 2 or 3 skills. If a career grants you a skill that you already have, you can select a different one. Some careers give you the opportunity to learn additional languages. Some careers allow you to start your starting renown score, which is there are some abilities that let you use renown, and the negotiation system can also use your renown score to like people take you more seriously and that sort of thing. And then project points would be basically some careers give you project points that you can kind of start with the idea of, like, if you want to be building a big invention or something like that, you get a certain amount to start with that you can build into making crafting roles to be working on that. And then your career provides you with a common title, but the titles section is not in here yet. But it also encourages you to think for this career of inciting incident. Like, if that is what you were doing, why aren't you doing it now? Like, why did you stop doing that? Why are you a hero now? And part of that might say, what was taken from you? And it has some like suggestion stuff that you could possibly use. And then it says, right now, playtest note, there are currently 3 inciting incidents for each career, but more are coming. So example careers here: artisan, criminal, gladiator, laborer, mage's apprentice, performer, sage, soldier. And then it has a little table where it says possible inciting incidents, but obviously that's another thing where, like, you don't have to choose one of those 3. It could be whatever you want. But for example, if you were going to be a laborer, you worked as a farmer, a builder, a lumberjack, a miner, some other profession engaged in hard manual labor. In defining your career, think about the following questions. What type of manual labor did you do? What important friendship did you make on the job? Where did you go with your coworkers to blow off steam when the job was done? What aspect of the job was most difficult for you? And then you gain the skills. That one gives you the endurance skill, plus choose any 2 skills from blacksmithing or the skills of the exploration skill group. And then you gain 1 language, you get 50 project points, and your title, Team Backbone. When you take your first turn during a montage test, you can make both a test and assist another hero's test. And montage test is basically kind of like a skill challenge from D&D, where you're doing a montage where everybody is helping in some way to move things along, but it's not a combat round. It's just a longer term. Everybody's pitching in to help with something. So that's just an example. There's several others to choose from here. Does anyone have a career picked out already, and the other choices made for it?
I had chosen Mage's Apprentice because I was looking at a very magical version of this. But as I went through it, it was just not giving me the feel that I wanted. So I'm switching over to Soldier.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, contrary-wise, I'm sticking with Mage's Apprentice, and I'm having to switch out one of my skills that I got from my culture.
All right. Well, and that's totally fine. You absolutely can do that.
Should we maybe answer like if we have any for the questions for the career? Should we?
I mean, if you have something you really want to bring up, I don't think we necessarily need to go through all of those for every one of them. I was just reading them as examples of the kind of material that the PDF has.
Okay. Well, I have mine, and
Okay.
it is artisan.
All right.
And I chose jewelry and mechanics as skills. And like one of the questions I came up with an answer to is who taught you your craft? And my thought is my parent, who wasn't a dragon knight. I imagine my character's egg was discovered, abandoned, or a victim of an attack, and this the blacksmith, like, oh, there's a forge, can provide heat, and I hatched, and I was raised by that blacksmith, and
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
And the idea of what was taken from me is that the forge, like I essentially inherited the forge, and there was some sort of sabotage to the forge that caused it to explode, and that I think would have a repercussions with the class I'll take,
Sure.
which we'll probably figure out right away.
Okay. What about you, Lee, for your Mage's Apprentice? Did you come up with an inciting incident?
I think oops probably works the best. While studying magic, you accidentally sent yourself from your original world to this one. Now you're stranded here, hoping to get back by finding an ancient text or powerful magical treasures that might transport you there. A life of adventure it is.
Adventure, whether you like it or not.
So for Nobilis, for yours, I could imagine that because of your Hakan, it could be that the Doom Sight came upon you, and that would be it.
That's exactly it. Yep.
All right. What about you, Paul?
Okay, so yep, I'm going with laborer, obviously. I never really thought about what Ale did way back in his village, but I'm now kind of seeing him as kind of like building stone structures. So, and now I've kind of retconned Ale's background to he worked with the local priest to help build a new chapel. I mean, Bahamut doesn't exist in this world, but Bahamut for a lot, and that's why Bahamut chose him, because he made this friendship with the priest.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets endurance. I gave him lift and he gave him climb, and yeah, and the sign incident was of course the divine vision saying, "Go on the road and do in my name, and you don't say no to a god."
Sure.
So he left his village and never went back.
Okay. So that's everyone for career, I think, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So next is classes. So I'll talk through just very briefly what each of the 5 offered classes are in this material, and then we'll talk more about it. There is quite a lot of variation within each. There's essentially subclasses in several of these that make them fairly different. So don't necessarily jump to a conclusion about what each class means up front. But to start, conduit. The power of the gods flows through you as a vessel for divine magic. You don't just keep your allies in the fight, you make those allies more effective, even as you rain divine energy down upon your foes. As a conduit, while the deity or saint you serve might have other faithful and clergy, you are special among worshippers, receiving your abilities from the highest source. As a conduit, you heal and buff your allies and debuff your foes while smiting them with divine magic. The spark of divinity within you shines, awing your enemies and granting you increased empathy. Now, obviously, this seems to be closest parallel to like a cleric or a paladin, and it has a lot of different features that kind of could let you sort of lean towards either of those archetypes. We'll talk more about like the individual things that it touches on for each of these in a minute. But first, the next class is Elementalist. Air for movement, earth for permanence, fire for destruction, water for change, green for growth, rot for death, void for the unknown. Years of study and practice and poring over tomes brought you the revelations that allow you to manipulate these building blocks of reality. Now you use your mastery of the 7 elements to destroy, create, and warp the world with magic. As an elementalist, you can unleash your wrath across a field of foes, put an enemy exactly where you want them, debilitate foes with harmful effects, ward yourself and allies against danger, manipulate terrain, warp space, and more. Your choice of elemental specialization determines which of these things you do best. So it seems to be most directly a parallel with like a sorcerer, perhaps, but other casters generally as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also the Fury. You do not temper the heat of battle within you. You unleash it like a raptor, a panther, a wolf. Your experience in the wild taught you the secret of channeling unfettered anger into martial prowess. Primordial chaos is your ally. Leave it to others to use finesse to clean up the pieces you leave behind. As a Fury, you have abilities that deal a lot of damage, move you around the battlefield, and grow in strength as your rage increases. Nature has no concept of fairness, and neither do you. Now, this seems most obviously a parallel to the Barbarian, but there's actually some Druid stuff in there as well. Then you have the Shadow. Subtlety is your art, the tip of your blade your brush. You studied at a secret college specializing in alchemy, illusion, or shadow magics. Your training and knowledge places you among the elite assassins, spies, and commandos. But more powerful than any weapon or sorcery is your insight into your enemy's weakness. As a shadow, you have abilities that deal a lot of damage, let you move swiftly across the battlefield and away from hazards, and allow you to fade from notice even in the middle of the most heated combat encounter. You also possess more skills than any other hero. And this is, seems like it's a rogue, but it's almost all of them are basically explicitly magical. There's some degree of like magical ability in almost all of the options here. And then the fifth and final in this material is the Tactician, strategist, defender, leader. With sword in hand, you lead allies into the maw of battle, barking out commands that inspire your fellow heroes to move faster and strike more precisely. All the while, you stand between your compatriots in death, taunting the followers of evil to best you if they can. As a tactician, you have abilities that heal your allies and grant them extra damage, movement, and attacks. You can taunt your enemies into attacking you instead of targeting your allies, and can help soak up damage when those allies stand alone. And there's kind of there's the Battle Master Fighter archetype in D&D, which I quite like. I play one in another campaign, but this has some cool stuff that's kind of like that, but seems to actually sort of deliver on the promise a bit more even, I think. So in each of these classes in the material here is going to have the basics, the starting characteristics. So for example, with Tactician, you start with a might of 2 and a reason of 2. And then for the remaining 3 characteristics, you can choose to have another 2 and then 2 minus 1s. You can have a 1, and a minus 1, or you can have a 1, 0, 0. And obviously, any of these, it's basically just having a modifier straight instead of having a score that then dictates the modifier that you actually use, which has always been kind of a weird, archaic element of D&D. Like, what's the score for if all it does is determine what the modifier is? Why not just have the modifier? But all right.
Previous versions have had the requirements for particular armors or feats or what have you start on the odd numbers, so that the odd numbers would qualify you for things, and then the even numbers would give you a bonus.
Yeah,
But
fair. Yeah. So
I will wager that 6th edition is going to have just modifiers.
well, I mean, certainly not these new
No,
5.5 and the 24
rules.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 2034.
Yeah. All right. Well, so in any case, though, the other things that we have in each of these classes that it starts just mechanically is that you have your starting stamina at first level. It tells you how much stamina you gain as you level up with each level. And note that these are not die rolls. It just gives you a number. And it says how many recoveries do you have. And then skills, it gives you, like, again, a choice of more skills to pick from. And once again, there's going to be the rule of, like, if one of the ones like that you would want there is the same as one you have already, you can pick a different one. And then it has a little tactician advancement here that loosely shows like the names of things that you would get as you get to level 2 and 3, but it only we only have the material for the first level stuff. And then it talks about first level features, and there's various categories here that talks to about like, so this tactical doctrine is basically which subclass you're picking. Focus is sort of a resource that you get. It's going to be very similar to resources that the other classes have, where for a tactician, it's called focus. And so outside of combat and other dangerous situations, the focus you have is equal to the victories. Remember what we talked about with victories. So that means the more victories you've got in that day, the more of this resource you have access to, and it powers your abilities. It lets you do more powerful things when you have more focus. And when a combat encounter begins, you start with however much you had before. So if, for example, you had, the number of you say you have 3 victories, that means you have 3 focus. You start with 3 focus, but then you also, at the start of each of your turns, you gain 2. So you have things that are going to like be more powerful the more focus you have, but also then you can spend it to do more powerful things. And then you kind of just decide whether you want to hold it and spend it and save up for it, or if you want to be using your more powerful things all along, but not ever getting to the most powerful thing. Pretty much every class has something like that. It's not always, like, I think Conduit has it called Piety, but it functions very similarly.
Right.
And then we have some of these other sort of abilities that are getting into here that are specific to the tactician. And then some features that it talks about. You have different ones depending on which of the doctrines you picked, like which subclass. And then there's also going to be triggered actions. Those are basically things that you can do, like with a reaction. Basically, there's going to be certain conditions that can occur, and under those conditions, you can use the triggered action. It doesn't have to be your turn. That's what a triggered action is. And then other abilities that you would be choosing from here. And like, for example, on this list here, it talks about how the tactician can actually allow you with the field arsenal. One of the things that the tactician has is essentially the ability to be wielding 2 different kits, and that you get a signature ability from each of them. And then it talks about other things that you can do if you have enough focus. So, for example, if you have 5 focus, then on your turn you can do some of these really powerful things. And so that's basically what it shows for each of these classes. Has everybody kind of are people sort of still working through it, or do we have anyone who's ready to?
I'm ready.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
I'm running on ahead.
Ah,
Yeah. For my concept here, the shadow class, Black Ash, College of Black Ash is right on target for what I want.
okay.
What I'm having trouble with is which slot does the Black Ash teleport ability go in? There's spaces on the character sheet for signature abilities,
Mm-hmm.
kit signature abilities, heroic abilities, and triggered action.
So
Is it a-
first level college features here has these
Uh-huh.
first level shadow college features. If you have the Black Ash College, you get the Black Ash teleport ability
Right.
here. And so I think that ability, let's see, on the sheet, I've got so one of the things that's a little bit something that they may work on as they develop the material a little bit closer is that they have different form fillable character sheets for the different classes, but they've also got a character building process that doesn't have you pick the class until towards the end. So you would have had to be choosing other things before you picked the class. Also, they're pretty similar. The
Yeah.
different sheets. Like if you're watching the stream, I'm switching now between between the two for the different classes, and they're very similar. But in any case, I would think that you have yeah, I'm not sure necessarily on these sheets where that stuff goes, because it's you're going to have, let's see, so that's first level college feature, and I would imagine also, like, as you level up, you're going to have more. So it's probably a heroic ability, I would guess.
Okay.
As far as where on the sheet to put it. So yeah, as a College of Black Ash, this Black Ash teleport ability points out that it's like the distance is self, meaning you're using it on yourself. It's magic. It's you do it as a maneuver. Everybody on your turn has your normal movement, and then a maneuver is basically like doing something that might theoretically need a roll or is a little bit more difficult. So like just walking across the room is not a maneuver, but if you had to jump across a pit, that might be a maneuver. And then there are other things you can do as a maneuver like this, which is, effect, you teleport up to 5 squares. If you end this movement in concealment or cover, you can use the hide maneuver even if you are observed. And then if you spend one of your insight on it, you teleport 1 additional square for each insight you spend. And so that would be something on your turn that you use as a maneuver, and then you would still have your action. And then it looks like you would. What?
Go ahead.
And then so you're also going to have a triggered action that, based on Black Ash College, you have in all this confusion, which is, a lot of the ability names are fun in this game. So in that one is like, well, if I'm just describing them for you at this point, do you want to describe them instead?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's teleporting away in a plume of black smoke to avoid danger.
Mm-hmm.
So a little shade of the D&D rogues uncanny dodge,
Mm-hmm.
but a little more flavorful in that you actually move around the battlefield when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. And then I also have one signature ability, and I have a bunch to choose from.
Hmm.
Um, and um, I'm just looking at.
Yeah. I'm seeing that
Um,
their heroic abilities is another category here too. So I think what's
yeah,
interesting about this sheet as it has here is that it feels like there's several things in the heroic abilities where like you don't have to choose between those. You can do any of those that you want as long as you spend the insight on them. So it's not clear why the character sheet would have just like
I
two spaces for it.
um
Because right now it's a range of heroic abilities define your combat prowess, all of which make use of your insight.
mm,
Actually, I guess,
it does look like you pick one. To me, it looks like you
yeah.
pick one.
Well, so
Maybe
but
some
then it
feedback
also,
to send
but
back
like,
to the
but so
MCDM
well,
there.
so three insight. Okay, so I guess you're right. It so you choose one of the three ones, and then you choose one of the five ones. Okay, I see. So that would be what goes in the heroic insight, the heroic ability spot. Um,
Yeah,
the triggered action is clear. The signature ability is clear on the sheet, but you're right. There's
yeah,
not an obvious place to put that the uh, the college feature
yeah,
unless it's on the unless it's in that on the second page right where it says class shadow. There's a field there that doesn't really describe anything else there. That's probably where I
yeah. I
would
was
put
going
it.
to put it there if I didn't have
Hmm.
someplace else. Yeah,
Okay. So have you chosen then which of those?
yeah. The signature ability is going to be distracting pain.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and uh, the heroic ability. Um, um,
You choose one of the three insight ones and one of the five insight ones.
so for the 3 insight, I think I like quick pursuit. Sounds in character for
Hmm.
what I'm building. You know,
Hmm.
uh,
So one of the things to note with quick pursuit is a foe forced away from you might assume they're out of danger, but they'll soon learn otherwise. And so you'll see some of these when they talk about what it does. It might say push to. It'll have a number of damage and say push to, for example. And what that means is they
mhm,
take the damage and then they are pushed 2 squares away from you. But when it says slide, like this one, it means it pushes them back, but you stay right there with them without you having to spend extra movement of your own. And so that means that you're shoving them back, but like staying right up there in their face.
right, right. And for the 5, um, assassinate
Hmm.
is absolutely
Yeah.
the right one.
Okay. And so several of those are just damage, like the distracting pain it gives, for example, is like you're doing some damage, but like, with the tier 2, it's like you do the damage and the next attack against the target gains an edge. Or with a tier 3 result, it's more damage and the target falls prone. Um, and so lots of cool stuff. You also, hesitation is weakness, is probably also going to go in your college one, that same box, I would think, since there's not an obvious other place to put it. Um,
Uh,
because there's, yeah, so after
oh, yeah,
the college triggered action, you know how to seize the advantage in battle, working with your allies to find the perfect moment to strike. You have the following ability. Hesitation is
okay,
weakness. And what that basically lets you do is normally in initiative, let's say you just had your turn. Normally it would be a turn for the enemies to act, right? But you can have your situation be like one of your allies has just finished their turn, and you can use this free triggered action to have your turn immediately follow their turn instead of waiting for the others.
right,
But it costs you an insight to do that.
right.
Okay, cool. Who else is? How did you assign your characteristics?
Oh, well, I start off with 2 agility and 2 presence.
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to make a Hakan that did not have at least a bit of might. So I took a might 1. Intuition seems really important for this concept, so I took the might 1, intuition 1, and reason -1.
Okay, cool. All right, who else has got all of their choices picked out?
I do.
Okay.
Let's start with characteristics. I went with yeah, I get to intuition 2 and presence 2.
You are
and I
doing
went with-
conduit?
I am doing conduit,
Yeah, mhm.
obviously. Yep.
Well, I
Um,
mean, you can still say it out loud though.
Yes, I could. Yeah, I should do that for the podcast. Yes.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I went with the 2 -1 -1. So I went with might 2, agility -1, and reason -1 because remember, Ollie was slow and not the smartest person, but he could hit like a brick.
Right.
So that's kind of the closest thing I can get to
Mhm.
him. So so I picked I took 2 skills from the lore groups, nature and timescape, which I think would be fun. For war, he gets ritual of preparation, which as a respite action, I can bless a weapon. So I can go bless people's weapons as we fight.
What?
Healing
Wait.
graces-
Wait. So you're the war domain? Is that
yeah,
what? Okay.
yeah, I created my own. I created Bahamut, who basically is similar to the other ones, except it's
Okay,
knowledge
sure.
protection storm war instead of knowledge protection sun
Okay.
war. So I focused on war for this time. So
Okay, well,
I did-
that's fine. I was just so
Yeah.
so you're kind of going through stuff really fast. I was just
Oh,
not able
yeah,
to
blah, blah,
follow
blah,
it,
blah,
even
blah,
though
blah.
I'm looking at the PDF. So.
Okay, I'm going a little fast.
Yeah,
My
yeah,
apologies.
that's
okay,
okay.
so anyway, so yeah, so that's my conduit deity. Okay,
Okay.
so
And
so
so,
I
what
picked-
domain would that be? Because you get certain things depending on the domain.
right, the war domain of
Okay.
well, war domain.
And so your attacks deal extra damage equal to twice your intuition score until the end of your next turn.
Right, if I get the tier 3 result of a prayer, yes.
Well, no, that's yeah,
Yeah, that's- yeah, well,
exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So I gotta get good on the prayer, and then I can
Mhm.
get that penny. So yeah, going back, yes, first domain feature, I picked war ritual preparation, which is, as I had said, but more
Mhm.
slowly as a respite action, I can bless a weapon. Any creature who wields the weapon gains a +1 bonus to damage. This lasts to my next respite. So
Mm-hmm.
I can bless people's weapons. Healing graces, spending piety to
Mm-hmm.
let people spend recoveries. People could stand up. They can spend extra recoveries. They can I can end effects on targets. Standard cleric stuff.
Right. Although, again, just as we touched on earlier, I think it's interesting to note that what you're doing here is you're allowing them to spend one of their own recoveries, and it's just that they don't have to spend their turn
to
to
do
do-
it. Yes,
to do
so it's an action
Um,
economy thing.
Yeah, so it just does mean that it's not a way around if someone is running low on recoveries, you can't, give
Right.
them more.
I can't give them more. No.
Right.
Right. So next thing up is Pious Force, which is kind of like their Sacred Flame. It's basically a divine attack I can just do at that range
Yeah.
5.
You unleash a blast of raw divine magic upon your foe.
By the power of Bahamut, you will burn.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so
or get
ranged
shocked.
5 means within 5 squares of you.
Right. Whatever you define a square as.
Yeah.
The director defines the squares. Yep.
Yeah.
So then next I get a triggered action. I went with Holy Infusion. I invigorate an attacking ally with divine energy. They gain an edge and deal holy damage equal to twice my intuition score.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could spend the piety and they have a double edge and deal holy damage equal to twice my intuition
Well,
score.
and you can, for example, if someone's about to make an attack, you can give this to them ahead of time. But you can also, for example, you wait, and if you to see if their roll was going to be a 2-tier result, but that giving an edge, which would be a +2, if that would get them to a tier 3 result, you can choose to do it after that.
Oh, nice. I didn't see
It
that.
does say you can use this ability after seeing the result of the attack.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Mhm.
As excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is conduit abilities. My signature ability is Holy Lance. A tendril of divine energy shoots force to draw in my foe.
Mhm.
So basically, it does holy damage and pulls them towards me, which
Yes,
I think
it
is an
is-
interesting difference.
It's the pious version of Scorpion's Get Over Here.
Yes, exactly. And I thought I liked that a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, Ole was never a tactician, so some of the others didn't seem right. But that whole get over here so I can kick
Yeah.
your butt is definitely Ale. So I went with Holy Lance.
Very nice. Okay.
Okay, so,
And choose one of the 3 piety abilities and one of the 5 piety abilities.
right. So I went with Righteous Rebuke because that's Divine Wrath strikes your foe with lightning that follows them across the battlefield. That is definitely Ale. So I basically can, if I can possibly get more damage if
Yeah. Basically, you zap
around
them, and then if they attack uh, anyone
someone else,
else
they get more
on
they
the
get more
next round,
zapped.
they get more zapped. Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And the five piety ability, I went with Armor of the Faithful, basically giving temporary stamina to my allies.
All right.
The going to more the protective role for that.
Nice.
And
Okay.
I think that's everything. Yeah.
Great. Lee, Dove.
Uh, yeah,
Go ahead.
You
No, you go.
okay? Well, I am doing Shadow as well.
Okay.
Ash, which exploding forge,
Mm-hmm.
imbued,
Sure.
imbued the character with Ash,
Okay.
and Black Ash teleport, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Heroic abilities are um, Wounding Strike, which I basically have an opportunity to give bleed damage
Mm-hmm.
essentially to a
Right. And what bleeding does, the status effect of bleeding in this game basically means they cannot regain stamina until they end that condition.
yeah, and and oh, and for starting stamina, same as with Nobilis.
Mm-hmm.
For skills, I took hide, seek, and then uh, let's see, gymnastics, lift, ride.
Okay.
See, intimidate, persuasion, and also I gain magic as a skill as well.
Okay. You didn't say your signature ability or your 5 insight heroic ability.
Oh, 5 insight heroic ability is get out,
Okay.
which is basically allows me to um move without getting an attack of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and my signature ability was um I work better alone,
Okay.
which if the target has no allies adjacent to them, you gain an edge on the attack.
Um, Interesting. I'm just looking at it because I work better alone. I feel like the title, I would normally expect that to mean like you're alone and you're working better alone. But this move, what it
But
seems to be, okay. I
Mm,
my whole point is that that's not what the move does.
yeah,
But
yeah.
okay, but that's what I'm saying is that what the effect of it does is it's an attack, and if the target has no allies adjacent to them, you gain an edge. So it's more that you're able to do better attacking an enemy that is by themselves. So like finding one in isolation and taking them out, Batman style.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's not about you being alone; it's about the enemy being alone. Which
yeah,
is that not what you were thinking?
yeah.
Okay. Well, you're just making hesitant noises.
I'm just I'm looking through things and I
Okay,
just
that's fine.
like
That's fine. That's fine.
trigger
Yeah.
that. Sometimes the way this is arranged is a little confusing.
Okay. Did you have a question?
Well, I was trying to figure out where all the triggered actions are, but
It's
I
yeah.
found it.
Yeah, the previous page under college triggered action. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and that's just an example too of how, even though you and Nubilis both made shadows and you both picked the Black Ash College, your moves, your signature ability, and the heroic abilities are fairly different.
Mhm.
All right.
Mhm.
How about Lee? What about your character?
Yeah. I do actually have a name for her. I named her
Uh,
first thing.
All right, great.
Her name is Beverly.
Okay,
Um,
Beverly.
yeah, Beverly.
sure.
Now, is that her
Um,
real name or is that the name she picked when she got transported to this world?
I guess we'll find out if I ever play her.
Okay,
Um,
fair enough.
all right, so she's an elementalist.
Mm-hmm.
So she automatically has a reason of 2 and intuition of 2.
Mm-hmm.
And of the point spread, I picked 1, 1, and -1. So she has a 1 -1 in might,
Mm-hmm.
and 1 in agility, and a 1 in presence.
Great.
I figured that would be pretty cool
Mm-hmm.
and in line with what we're doing. And the reason I was kind of hemming and hawing a minute ago is because I completely changed the direction that I was going to go. At first, I thought, let's just do fire and we'll, you
Mm-hmm.
know, Lena Inverse as a devil woman, but I had a better idea. So she's actually going to be a void elementalist.
Okay. Void is the
Yeah.
element of the unknown. Void abilities warp space and reality, allowing you to teleport, create illusions, and make things incorporeal. Ooh,
Yes.
very cool.
So the basic ability you get that melee ranged free strike is the hurl element. So just
Yeah.
hurling balls of void energy all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a possibility that some abilities may be persistent and can be maintained based on the number of victories that you've got, which I
Yeah.
thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then how, practical magic and how magic, instead of using like might, you can use reason. So there's a lot of really cool stuff in here
Mm-hmm.
about that. But the other thing is that for magic, everything costs essence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So essence is your equivalent of the
Mhm.
focus or
Mana
the
or
piety, etc.
yeah. So the first ability is Void Sense,
Mm-hmm.
which is the ability to recognize other people's illusions. And you can instantly recognize illusions for what they are, see invisible creatures, supernatural effects, can't conceal creatures or objects from you. You always know. And so I can spend essence to let other people always know.
Mm-hmm. Or rather, you can you can allow them to know when you spend the essence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For a
Right.
limited amount of time.
Right.
The specialized triggered action is Void Embrace, which basically means I can teleport people.
Through the void, though. That's so creepy.
Yeah. So the black hole with tentacles opens up, hugs you, pulls you in, and then spits you out somewhere else. I just love that ability. And just
Mm-hmm.
just that idea is just randomly teleporting people around. And I can number of squares equal to my reason. So it's not like I can
Yeah. So
teleport you
and
across
you're
the battlefield. It's just
right.
like 2.
So your reason is 2, so you can move them 2 squares, but that could be tactically very valuable, right? Especially if
Mhm.
it could be 2 squares that have a wall in between them, for
Yeah.
example. But
Mhm.
also if you spend 1 essence, you can double that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and then signature abilities is Void Ray,
mm-hmm.
which is a beam of energy that corrupts and hinders whatever it touches
Yeah.
and deals corruption damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the 1 essence signature elementalist ability.
Yeah.
And
Well, so that
3,
one doesn't cost any essence. It's just a signature
yeah,
ability costs nothing. You can do that at will.
yeah.
But yeah, your 3. That
Yeah,
sounds-
my 3 is called Stare into the Abyss. You open a rift into the void to harry your enemies. And that costs psychic damage, or
Yeah.
that causes psychic damage.
Yeah, and it's an area of effect as well.
Yeah, it's a 4 cube within five, 5 squares, I guess.
Yeah.
And then my 5 essence ability is incorporealness. Material substance of a creature shreds away at your command. And that is a persistent one. Affects less until the start of your next turn.
Mhm. Yeah. So basically, you can make someone incorporeal. It could be on yourself or someone within reach, where they can basically they're
Yeah.
partially immune to damage. Like they can basically soak 5 of any damage type,
Uh-huh.
and then move through a square of solid matter. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, just because nobody else picked it, I'm going to walk through like a class of a Fury, for example, because there's some fun stuff in there. A Stormright Fury, for example, would start with a might and agility of 2, and then you would assign your other characteristics as the others do. Your resources rage, of course. And then you gain certain benefits in combat based on the amount of rage you have. So you can have the abilities that you save up the rage to use just like everyone else, but you also have other abilities that are stronger based on how much you've got stored up. So you'd have, you choose between whether you're a berserker, it's pretty standard. I think everyone would understand that one. A reaver is you channel your rage into instinct and cunning, challenging the false order of civilization. You gain the hide skill, so that's kind of like a barbarian rogue, sort of. But then there's Stormright. You channel your rage into the form of animals and primordial storms. And so I think that would be the one that I was looking at. With that one,
the quasi druid sort
yeah,
of thing.
exactly. With that one, you get the primordial shape, which basically you take a Stormright kit, which has a couple of different options. Instead of just changing into anything, you sort of pick one that is your animal form. And then you would have regeneration as part of that. So as a triggered action, if you lose stamina but you're not dying, as a triggered action, you can, if your rage is high enough, you can enter your animal or hybrid form as a free triggered action. And if you can't gain the temporary stamina from that form because you've already done so this encounter, you gain temporary stamina equal to your might, which is just stamina recovery. Then Fury abilities have stuff like there's a like Impaling Strike. Fighting up close lets you keep your foe exactly where you want them, where basically you can attack, do damage, and then they're grabbed. And if the target is grabbed, they take a bane on attempts to escape the grab. And if you move while you have them grabbed, they take damage for every square you move. So like you're grabbing them and dragging them around, and they're getting damaged for however far you move them. Then there's one here it's called "Stab Me So I Can Pull Myself Closer to You." That's a 3 rage heroic ability where you move up to your speed in a straight line toward a creature or object. You don't treat enemy creatures as difficult terrain for this move. So you're basically plowing through the enemy forces to your main target. If the target is a creature, you can end your movement in the target's square, moving them to an adjacent open square. You make a power roll against the target and every enemy you moved through. And so so basically you are attacking all of the ones that you move through, but then you do damage, and you are taking the opportunity attacks, the free strikes from the ones that you move past, but the target you're going after takes an extra 1d6 damage for every free strike you triggered from your move.
Wow.
Wow. But this
Oh,
also
man.
this also is a bit of tactical information here. You
Mhm.
don't treat enemy creatures as difficult terrain for this move, which suggests
Mhm.
that that's how this game works. That
Yeah, it
moving
is.
on a
Yeah.
battlefield to move, you can move through enemy
Mhm.
squares, but it's difficult terrain. So that's an interesting bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a blood for blood 5 rage ability, which is basically you can choose to deal 1d6 damage to yourself to deal an extra 2d6 to the target, in addition to standard attack stuff that leaves them weakened and bleeding. Even on a tier, so on that particular move, weakened and bleeding is even if you get a tier 1 result. But then Stormright kits, you can basically be like, you can be a bear, a crow, a rat, or a wolf. But even
Ooh.
the crow and the rat, because it has, you could imagine obvious disadvantages in combat of being something small like that. You're given like a combat rat form, like a sort of like hybrid
Hey.
rat person, like a halfway. Or you could be like a regular crow and a regular rat. But so, like, if you were a crow, Stormright Crow, Corvin form, you gain edge on tests to make you hide and sneak. Whenever you're falling, you can use your animal form as a free triggered action. You can, because you're small, you can fly. You can use the hide maneuver as a free maneuver. You can use your allies as cover to hide. And then when your rage is 4 or higher, you can become the hybrid bipedal crow of your true form size. You gain 10 temporary stamina when you turn into that form, and then you get wing buffet and fire damage, basically, stuff like that. But then one of the things we haven't touched on yet is that there's a whole mechanic in this game for climbing enemies. So if you're like fighting a dragon and you want to climb up on them, there's actually rules for that in this.
Ooh.
Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah. Well, and then one of the things that's fun too is the rat Stormright kit. Let's see, where was this? If you are hidden, wait, okay, hang on. Trying to find the specific. Where is it? There's the rat has a specific thing about climbing on an enemy. You gain okay, you gain an edge on tests made to climb other creatures. So basically, if you're just better at that. So in any case, yeah. So those are some of the characters you can kind of make. After you pick a class, you would pick a kit. So let's talk a little bit about kits. There are kit categories here. There's armor categories and weapon categories. And so for example, if a kit has heavy armor, then you're likely wearing metal from head to toe. Chainmail, ringmail, and suits of plate armor protect you better than any other mundane protection. If the kit has no armor, you can wear whatever clothing you like, robes, fashionable tunic and pants, or just loincloth. It's totally up to you. We heard that bit earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you are changing your kit, you can basically, if during a respite, you can change what kit you're using. There's martial kits, which are collections of weapons, armor, and related combat training. They are meant for heroes who primarily fight with weapons. Caster kits often include equipment, but are primarily methods of using magic that you meditate on. Every kit you use not only affects certain things about how you work, but each has its own signature ability as well.
Ooh, there's one called Frigid. Oh, that is so Ale. Yes. Yes, please.
So in any case, there's also, let's see, kits and treasures. When you find a supernatural item such as a magic sword, you can use the item as long as it matches one of your kit's equipment categories. So for example, if you wanted to use a magic sword, you have to be wearing a sword compatible kit. Each kit is going to have a speed bonus, a stability bonus, a damage bonuses, distance bonuses, reach bonuses, area bonuses, mobility bonuses. And so these are all things that, so stability, for example, if an enemy thing or an environmental feature was going to do something to try to knock you prone or move you, your stability gives you bonus to try to resist that. And then there's kit signature abilities. So there's a lot of different stuff here. I think there is not a rule about saying, for example, if you are an elementalist, you can't do a heavy armor martial kit. It's just that the bonuses that it gives you are not going to line up with what you normally want to do. So, for example, if we look at we've got some of these martial kits: cloak and dagger, martial artist, Guisarmier. I don't know how. Guisarmier. Mountain. The mountain kit does exactly what it says on the tin. You don heavy armor and a heavy weapon to stand strong against your foes. You wield heavy armor and wield a heavy weapon. And so you have like more stability, more stamina, but less, no speed bonus. So basically, I think it's only going to be, so you could be an elementalist mountain, right? Nothing stops you. It's just they're not going to harmonize necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But each of these kits has a different signature ability, and that applies both to the martial ones. So, for example, that mountain signature ability, Pain for Pain, is an enemy who tagged you will pay for that. And so if the target did, when you attack, if the target did damage to you since the end of your last turn, you get an edge on your attack against them. And so then, there's all of these different martial kits, but then there's also like Whirlwind is fun, where you're using like whips. And the signature ability, extension of my arm. When you draw your whip back after an attack, your enemy comes even closer, so you can like pull them towards you with the whip.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has a nice table here, which just summarizes the different balances, that you would, bonuses that you would get, etc. And then caster kits, we're going to have different sort of flavors to them too, which are going to give you different bonuses as well, and different flavor of signature abilities. So, for example, the frigid one that you mentioned, for heroes who want to tap into the power of arcane blizzards and magical cold, armed with only with an implement of crystal, you can create bursts of ice and protect yourself with frigid winds. When you meditate to prepare this kit, others notice the area around you becoming slightly colder. You have stamina bonus of +3. Whoops, I'm flipping through. Magic distance bonus +7. Magic area bonus +1. And so that means magic distance bonus, I think. So if you have a caster kit, the distance bonus increases the distance of your abilities with the magic and ranged keywords. So a distance bonus of +7. That's pretty significant.
I could hit things far away with my other caster stuff.
Yeah. And then signature ability of frozen explosion. It's an area of effect spell that does cold damage and causes slowed.
And I get ice armor. Your ward covers your body in ice and grants you the following benefits. You have cold immunity and fire immunity equal to your highest characteristic score. When a creature damages you with a melee ability, they take cold damage equal to your highest characteristic score.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah. So basically, all of these different kits, if you had someone who is going to be, like Lee's elementalist here, right? They could wear the heavy armor one and get that stamina and stability bonus, but they would be sacrificing other bonuses that might be more useful for the actual things you're going to do. Like, for example, having a distance bonus for your magical spells, right?
Yeah. And there actually is a heavy armor caster kit. It's called the Rook.
Yeah.
Kit allows you to use strong armor so you can be better protected while you heal and enhance your allies on the front line. Heroes with this kit on often dive into support magic. While using this kit, your armor resonates with the sound choirs from on
Oh,
high as you polish it. I think
oh.
that is probably better for your character, Paul.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that is
Well,
even more
right. And
Ale than
so,
the
like,
frigid. Oh
the
yes,
kit,
thank
so
you.
the signature ability is burning radiance falls upon your foe, outlining them with a holy glow, so that you do holy damage, and it's basically like guiding bolt. Then you also have the kit
Yeah.
ward castle guard. Your armor is reinforced by a bright ward of holy energy, and so the allies within 2 squares of you have their stability increased by 1, and whenever an enemy damages you with a melee ability, you or an ally within 2 can shift 2 squares as a free triggered action.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, lots of fun choices here. Basically, the martial kits, have the different weapons and the different bonuses.
I
and
was
signature
I
level.
was wrestling with this because
Yeah?
I wanted to make this a very kind of magically focused
Mm-hmm.
thing. I wanted it to feel magical,
Okay.
but I realized, and I was looking through the and all the like magic kits, the caster kits, gave bonus to magic damage, and my abilities were all weapon or abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So and melee and ranged. So that would not, it didn't fit. And then I said, wait a minute, let me just take martial artist, and instead of his martial art being punches and kicks, he's extending his hand, and and his target is uh
Uh, there's one
is
I noticed.
affected.
Well, Nobilis is
Sorry,
still talking.
oh, okay.
And just flavor it as if it's magical rather than um and just so I took the martial artist kit, and it also helps with the maneuverability
Mm-hmm.
aspect of it because it gives a speed bonus, and the melee weapon damage bonus is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
um it's to all levels, so even a weak hit still does a fairly amount of damage. So
It
and the
is.
battle grace ability is fun.
Yeah. It is interesting how some of them will spread it out. So, like, the damage bonus is +2, whether it's tier 1, 2, or 3. But some of them will be like no bonuses if it's tier 1 or 2. But if it's a tier 3, you get an extra 4 damage, for example.
Yeah,
Thing I was thinking of for Unobilis is dancer, like, and maybe with the
right. And
there's
the dancer
approval.
has a
It,
magic damage bonus that would be useless to me because I don't do any magic damage.
well, I mean, like,
Mm.
basically this kind of thing with like director's approval, have it have
Right,
that
but
applied
I'm
to.
I mean I'm trying to make it work within the
Mm-hmm.
system first.
Yeah.
And um yeah, the dancer is very similar to the martial artist. Why take dancer and it seems to me that it was more parsimonious to take martial artist and flavor it a little than to take dancer and actually change the stats.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
that was
I,
my thinking on it.
well, I was just saying like the way that dancer's signature ability works is
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
you know
it's very similar.
interesting.
It gets a lower speed bonus. It gets a lower damage bonus. Um, uh, uh, the 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 it's basically know it's basically the same as the martial artist with a few
Mm-hmm.
tweaks. I like martial arts better.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, well, it's also just, it's different because if the attacks you're going to be making are with weapon, then what you want is weapon damage bonus and not magic damage bonus. They're not
Right,
the same.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. For my kit, I chose martial artist.
All right. Well, there you go.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Probably for similar reasons, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're good. It's aligned with the concept you you conceived. Yeah.
Mhm.
Who else has one picked?
I think that's all of us.
Well, I'm still kind of vacillating in between the two of them, but the ones I've been looking at the most are missile, um,
Mm-hmm.
where you have your signet. Magic distance bonus is like +10, which is like awesome, and
Yeah.
then magic bonus damage where you basically you're lobbing your magic implement towards the opponent and then calling it back to you. And they named it Spike, and I think that was to get away from the popular yeet. Unless you're thinking about it like a volleyball where you spike it back.
I would also think like yeet to me conveys throwing something away, not like an attack that you would then call back to you.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
you yeet something in order to have it then come back. You yeet it to have
Okay.
it stay away, or at least that's just the flavor of it for me.
Okay.
I like the
Yeah, no,
idea of
it's
Spike
fine.
as being like,
I just thought it was funny.
I like the idea of Spike being like, artillery spikes into your.
Chugga.
Yeah, and then it has like a magic eye ward where you have ranged immunity. So because
Mm-hmm.
range attacks against magic wielders are always a pain in the butt. And whenever an enemy within 15 squares of you damages you with a ranged ability, your ward locks onto them until the end of the encounter, which means that I can always attack that person no matter how far they are away from me.
Oh, I was wondering.
As
Oh,
long as you
wow.
have
As
line of
long as
sight.
I have line of sight.
Wow.
So note that the ranged immunity, the way that works is that it's up to your highest characteristic, which is likely to
Yeah.
be 2, at least at
Just
level
2
1.
right now.
Yeah. So what that means is that you are, if you get hit, you're going to soak up to 2 damage.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even that little bit helps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
that's kind of where I was, when we were talking about it
I like that
for
one, especially in this group.
Mhm.
Have somebody in the back line to
Mm-hmm.
rain
Rain the fire.
rain
Rain
fire
down.
on the
Yeah.
foes.
Yeah, too bad he got squished last time.
Oh, what's that?
My poor little kobold.
My buddy.
Well,
Can we do
I
complications, or do we need? We're running out of time.
I think we're only at 9:07. I think there's time for
Okay.
complications. One of the last things I was going to say though about that piece is that staying back from the front line doesn't work when you place yourself directly from in front of the portal where the enemies came from and where they will have to go
Yeah.
back through.
Well, yeah, I understand that, and
Yeah.
that was an error on my part.
Well, like in fairness, you weren't aware necessarily that anything else was going to come through the portal. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and I wasn't aware there were going to be giants.
Yeah. So, as Nobilis mentioned, there's also complications which you can choose optionally, because they are something that would have happened to your character, and they will often offer both a benefit and a drawback. For example, fire and chaos. A great monster who breathed fire burned your home to the ground while everything around you was consumed. You somehow stood strong amid the inferno, your body adapting to ignore the effects of the flames. And you would have benefit, fire immunity 5, but drawback, cold weakness 5.
Interesting.
And so what cold weakness 5, so fire immunity 5, as we just discussed, let's say you have 10 fire damage incoming, you would take 5. You reduce it by 5. Cold weakness 5 means if you have 10 cold damage incoming, you take 15.
So even 1 point would be a significant hit.
Yeah.
6, yeah. So you add 5 to whatever it would be otherwise.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that punishment curse is wow. Through fear, ignorance, fear, spite, or selfishness, you refuse to
Oh,
help someone
gee.
in need and they cursed you. You have 2
Mhm.
additional recoveries. But when you're out of recoveries, you are dying no matter how much stamina you
So
have.
one
Wow.
clarification for the way that the rules work in this game is that um, when you are quote unquote dying is not the same as what we say dying is in D&D. You can still do things. And it is just that certain types of actions, in fact, most of the things that you would normally want to do, make you need to roll a d6 and then you lose that much more stamina. And you don't start dying until you're at 0. So basically, anything you try to do from there on is going to reduce you to a negative. And if you ever get to a negative value equal to your winded value, which is half your total stamina. So let's say your total stamina is 18. Your
Mhm.
winded value is 9. So now that you're at 0 and you're dying, if you want to do something, you have to roll a d6 and lose that much more stamina. So let's say you get to -5. But if you get to -9, you are dead.
And it's dead.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. But
Not just mostly dead.
right. But dying, the one other quirk to it is that if you are in the dying state, you cannot use a recovery as part of like a catch breath action, which is how you would normally do it. The catch breath action is when you want to use your own recovery on your turn with your action, you use the catch breath action. But if you're dying, you can't use that. Meaning it just basically means that whatever has happened to you is more severe than a moment of catching your breath.
So I took the Vivid Dreams one for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Now that's a suboptimal choice because it involves a reason power roll every time you take a respite. And my character's reason's -1. So those rolls would be more difficult for my character. But it just was so perfect
Mm-hmm.
that I just like, I have to take this. It fits in too well. So
Thanks.
and it helps with that whole and I would imagine that, you know, one of the options for character advancement is to raise attribute scores.
I would
So
guess, yeah.
Mhm.
you know, that's something I would focus on pretty early on, would be to raise that. But that also is like, you know, that vision becoming clearer and clearer as he advances. So I like that whole idea. Is you know, that vision of you know, who his target is and where he is and that kind of thing becoming, you know, getting more and more information as the time goes on. But also, you know, it has a price and yeah. So I took that complication.
Just to follow up on the dying conversation, I pulled up the actual language here. And so when your stamina is 0 or lower, you are dying. While dying, you can't take the catch breath action in combat, which basically means you cannot um, choose to use your turn to spend a recovery, even if you have recoveries available. Um,
Mhm.
Whenever you make a test using might or agility, make an attack, or use an action, maneuver, or triggered action, you lose 1d6 stamina after the action, maneuver, or triggered action is resolved. This stamina loss can't be prevented in any way. While you are dying, your allies can help you spend recoveries in combat. So, if, for example, a heal spell from the conduit that lets you use a recovery, you can still do it that way.
Mhm.
And then if the combat finishes, you can spend them yourself as usual. Um, but while your stamina is lower than 0, if it reaches the negative of your winded value, you die. When you die, you can't be brought back to life without the use of a special powerful item such as a scroll of resurrection.
Yeah, no raised dead spells.
Well, I mean, I would imagine some of those might come in at higher levels.
Maybe higher levels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, did anyone else want to choose a complication?
I was thinking of there's a the elemental absorption,
Mm-hmm.
or like, kind of things like, a magical explosion, and that's what her body absorbed.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
So you
I,
basically get added stamina, but
yes.
when you are dying, your possessing elemental takes control of your body.
Wow.
The elemental yearns for destruction, causing you to attack the closest creature they notice without regard for your desires or your body's safety.
As
Which
you're
means,
dying.
like,
Wow.
you might normally choose, if you're dying, to lay there calmly and not try to make yourself worse, but the elemental doesn't care. So that's fun.
Yeah. I don't know how it would work, but shipwreck looks fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
So I
does
mean,
look it,
you would
it
have
does look
to.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you could flavor it differently, but the idea would have to be you spent some time in a place where you would have gained 2 exploration skills but forgotten a language.
Yeah.
You were all alone somewhere. Yeah. Just
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know
okay.
how that would work, but like I said, that just seems fun. I'm not going to take it.
Yeah. Well,
No, if I was
these
gonna
are
pick
all
any, I
optional.
might.
No one has to
Yeah,
take any
Yeah.
of these.
that would
Yeah.
be the most interesting one.
Hmm.
I think that one or Ward, where you have a child that wants your advice and they trust you so much they take it,
Hmm.
no matter how bad it is.
No, what I mean, if you're going to have a campaign where you're tied in with nobility and
Hmm.
Hmm.
ruling classes, that's definitely one to give the GM all sorts of hooks for you.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you're venturing in dungeons, it's less interesting. But if you're
Yeah.
doing a politicky game in a city
Hmm.
where
Yeah.
you're running to rolls all the time, then that's much more interesting.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, as the playtest document here notes, there will be more complications to choose from in the final
Uh-huh.
product as well.
Yeah.
But so I think those are basically all of the character choices. So we could talk a little bit about some of the other rules, but I think a lot of them are not necessarily like they're interesting, but like crunchy and not necessarily suited for this type of conversation. But we could get into some of them. But one of the ones that I wanted to touch on at least is the negotiation system.
Hmm.
Because it actually has like a whole little sort of mechanical system for it. Um, we could also talk just about like the action economy of like what what are the maneuvers you can take on your turn, what are the actions you can take on your turn. We could talk about some of those things, but negotiation has basically anytime you're going to be negotiating with this NPC, the director will have chosen to give them um, motivations and pitfalls, meaning motivations are 2 things that like they care about. So whatever they want, there's 2 elements of it that is like why do they want it? And then pitfalls are 2 things where it's a reason theoretically someone might want the thing, but is not what they care about. And then they will have a score that is an interest score and a patience score. And certain things, depending on like their attitude, going into the starting attitude, might dictate how much interest and how much patience they have to start with. But basically, what happens is you make tests without necessarily knowing what their motivations or pitfalls are, right? So if you choose to make an argument that you choose to argue in the line of one of their pitfalls, that's going to be an automatic fail, and probably both their interest and their patience is going to go down. If you make an argument that is one of their specific motivations, then you're more likely to increase their interest and maybe not deplete their patience, and then in between and so on. And so the basic idea here is that if their interest ever gets to 0, they basically are not going to make a deal with you.
Hmm.
If their patience ever gets to 0, then whatever their interest score at that point is going to dictate how much they might be willing to like give you or ask of you, right? So, for example, you know, if their interest is 5 at the end of the negotiation, then that's a yes. And if the interest is 5, they offer everything the heroes initially asked for and then sweeten the deal. But then, for example, a 3 would be a yes, but that's like, okay, I'll give you what you want, but you need to do something else for me. And then interest 1 would be no. Interest 0, no, and they offer nothing, refuse to negotiate further, and seek to harm the heroes.
Wow. Oops.
Yeah. So there's lots of interesting stuff going there, and you can, you know, this the whole little mechanics for that I think are fun. So, did anyone have any questions about the way the game works, or anything else you wanted to touch on before we can maybe?
Basics are pretty clear to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to know when I can play. I mean, this character feels really interesting to me.
Mhm.
A bit of there's a little core of the first character I played in Curse of Strahd,
Oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
who was
yeah.
supposed to be a persistence hunter, but his persistence got him killed. So, so
Yeah.
having a persistence hunter who can't be killed
Mhm.
really strikes a chord with me.
I can imagine.
Nice. I mean, you know, what was his name? It was like Javik or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I
Uh,
don't.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, his death allowed me to play my diviner wizard, which was
yeah.
turned out to be a lot of fun too.
Well,
So
he
I'm
also
not.
died saving people
Yep.
mostly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like
Mostly.
yeah. Well, it was a sort of like in retrospect, it turned out to have not been necessary, but certainly the motivation for he made a brave
Yeah.
sacrifice that turned out to have not actually been necessary. But it you know it
Yeah.
doesn't deny that it was a brave, noble thing to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Anyone else have any other questions? There's fun stuff here too, just in terms of really defining things like what it means to, you know, grab someone or knock back, which is, you know, in some ways very similar to the grapple or shove, but you know, it has it just
Right.
defined all in a little different way.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is like, how does the how does the game handle falling?
Well, it handles it very explicitly. Where let me see if I can find where it talks about it. It's in here. I just saw it, and now
I'm
Falling.
reminded of a quote from George Patton, General Patton, who said, "No dumb bastard ever won a war by going out and dying for his country. He won it by making some other dumb bastard die for his country."
Mhm.
Exactly.
That
Mhm.
was Javik's problem.
He was the one that went out and died.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Um, gosh, I am all right. Let's see.
Page 94.
Okay, thank you. Because I knew I saw it. So yeah, so when you fall 2 or more squares, you take 2 damage for each square you fall, and then land prone. But when you fall, you reduce the effective height of the fall by a number of squares equal to your agility score. So basically, if you had an agility score of 2 and you were going to fall 4 squares, then you know adjudicate it by calculating falling 2 squares. So you take 2 damage for each 4 damage, right? Falling into liquid that is at least 1 square deep reduces the effective height of a fall by 4 squares. I think that's interesting that it has a specific rule for that. It makes it also clear that it is not forced movement. Um, falling onto another creature basically says you both take the full damage. It doesn't split. Um,
Oh.
yeah, and then when you fall from a great height, it basically says you can fall up to 100 squares per round, and you basically you're considered to fall immediately that far. But if it's further than that, then you would fall another 100 the next round.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
I
That-
forget what game was it that we played where we had the fall. It was kind of like a Wile E. Coyote, where it was like the fall started the next turn.
I don't recall.
I I don't know
I
if
think
that was
that
the
was
game
one
I
of
was
the really
referring.
long jumps we've seen occasionally. Not a fall,
Yeah,
but a leap.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
I
certainly
don't
in
remember.
D&D it can happen, for example, that you could theoretically make a jump that is longer than you're allowed to move on a given turn. And so what that means is that you are sort of suspended mid-jump until it's your turn again to finish it.
Hmm.
Which is one of the weirder applications of the rules there. But sometimes you can't make rules that easily apply to every single possible hypothetical situation.
And another thing is how is damage applied?
Well, I
Like
mean,
stamina is like what you're
yeah,
uh,
I mean, stamina is
and
basically your hit points. So if you take 9 damage, then you reduce your stamina by 9.
okay. So like with the complication and kit and all that stuff, my character has 27 stamina.
Okay.
Uh, but so like one of the attacks I do, or actually a couple of attacks I do 12 damage.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm.
that'd be like
Well, remember
territory.
you're making level 1 characters. They're not going to be as tough as
Yeah.
they will eventually be.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Just seems like yeah. Just doesn't seem like there's as much like mitigating damage that
I mean, I'm not sure I agree if you're comparing it to like a level 1 D&D character that usually might have like 9 hit points.
Mhm.
yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, mhm.
Hmm. Okay.
But yeah, so in any case, there's lots of interesting stuff in this new system. I like how much stuff is about moving around the battlefield in interesting ways and moving enemies around the battlefield in interesting ways.
Hmm.
Um, some of it, I think, I would want to just actually try to play it for a little bit to see if I can wrap my head around like changes to um, the initiative and that sort of thing. But I do certainly like the making the attacks a little bit more like Powered by the Apocalypse sort of
Mhm.
thing,
Mhm.
with
Hmm.
the different tests. But then even attacks, like even power in PBTA, if you get a bad roll, you still might miss, right? But like in this one, it's sort of like if you're making an attack, you're going to do
You're gonna
some
have some kind
damage.
of effect.
Yeah.
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 And
I
calling it stamina, is a good move because at the very least, someone is spending energy blocking that blow,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Hmm.
costs stamina,
Right. It's,
right?
this game definitely leans into a way of thinking of health that some people try to apply in Dungeons and Dragons, and I've always kind of like been skeptical of it, of the idea that your hit points in D&D are not literally how much life do you have, but it's like your ability to sort of resist a killing blow. And so it's not like if you have 20 hit points and someone attacks you with a sword and does 7 damage to you, that doesn't mean they actually cut you with the sword and you're bleeding. It means that you blocked it but had to expend so much energy to block it that you are weakened and more susceptible to a killing blow. But I've never felt like that actually works, because it's like, how do you do that with fire damage or acid
Yeah.
damage or
mhm.
a bite that where they're sucking blood from you or something like that?
Yeah.
And that said, all of that is a way to get around the extremely silly nature of just being able to get a long rest and immediately being healed from all wounds you had.
Hmm.
Which is not remotely realistic, but at some point you just have to say, but you're actually playing a game where there's magic and werewolves and stuff. So anyway, I think it's
Anyway.
interesting that I would really want to see how the whole victories resource works and combining that with the idea of the long respite needs
Mhm.
24 hours, not just can you manage to be safe for 8 hours. You basically need to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
24 hours in a safe place.
Yeah, I can imagine that this would work really well in like a zombie apocalypse kind of situation.
Hmm.
Like, could be flavored that way.
All right. Well, so this is fun, and I think at some point in the future we may revisit this and play it some. Of course, when we have our players available, we'll continue our Planescape Turn of Fortune's Wheel campaign. So hopefully we'll do that. But not next week. Next week we will not have a session. So,
Okay.
but
Yep.
when we return, hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll continue that campaign. And so when we do, we'll return for more adventure on so many levels.
So many
So
levels.
many levels.